All right, let's jump right into it. Today we're tackling a rule that sounds so simple, right? Make friends with people who want the best for you. But, as we're about to see, this idea is anything but simple. It's actually one of the most profound and honestly, one of the toughest truths about who we let into our lives and how that single choice can shape literally everything. So, we're going to start with this Michelangelo's David. Now, you're probably thinking, what on earth does a 500-year-old statue have to do with my friends? But I promise you, by the end of this, you'll see exactly what this masterpiece reveals about the people you choose to have around you. Trust me on this. To really get the weight of this rule, we need to go somewhere, well, somewhere pretty bleak. We're heading to the author's hometown, a place so incredibly harsh that your choice of friends wasn't just a social preference. It was, and I'm not exaggerating here, a matter of survival. I want you to picture this. Fairview, Alberta, a tiny little frontier town basically scraped out of the massive northern prairie. We're talking a population of 3,000 people and a full 400 miles from anything you could even call a city. And back then, no cable TV, no internet, just total, complete isolation. And then you've got the cold. And we're not just talking about putting on an extra sweater. This was a soul-crushing 40 below kind of cold. The kind of cold where the air is so dry it actually hurts to breathe, where ice literally forms on your eyelashes, where smoke from a chimney just gives up and sinks back to the ground. In a world like that, your car not starting isn't just an inconvenience. That's a full-blown crisis. So you can imagine, in a place like that, with those long, dark winters and absolutely nothing to do, your friends become your entire world. They weren't just important, they were everything. And that's exactly why the choice of who to befriend carried so much weight. So, what happens when you make the wrong choice? Let's look at a couple of cautionary tales. The author's friend, Chris, and his cousin, Ed. Their stories show us what it means to surround yourself with people who aren't just stuck, they're actively spiraling downwards. On paper, these guys had so much going for them. Chris was incredibly smart, a natural engineer. Ed was younger, but he was witty, charming, the whole package. But underneath all that potential, man, they were lost. Chris was just eaten up by this angry, hopeless resentment. And Ed? He just drifted, surrounded by a crowd that was every bit as lost as he was. Chris's beat-up truck was called the exoskeleton of a nihilist. What a powerful way to describe his worldview. And this bumper sticker on Chris's truck, which was always getting into accidents, it just says it all, doesn't it? Be alert. The world needs more alerts. The irony, of course, was the entire point. It's a joke, sure, but it's the kind of joke that's just dripping with this dark, cynical worldview that celebrates carelessness. So what did their world look like? Well, it was this teenage wasteland of just aimlessly cruising around, going to these grim parties and basements, and just embracing this oppressive feeling of doing nothing. See, joining the debating club or playing sports, that stuff wasn't cool. What was cool? Doing nothing. It was a very conscious choice to just be aimless. So where does that path end? Where does that kind of thinking lead? Years later, Ed turns up with a friend who is so high he says this, "My particles are scattered all over the ceiling." I mean, that's just a gut punch, right? It's this haunting image of a person who has completely come apart. That is the final stop on the downward spiral. Now, when you hear a story like that, a lot of us have this impulse, right? We want to jump in and rescue people like Chris and Ed. It feels noble, like the right thing to do. But we have to take a really hard look at that impulse, because often it's way more dangerous and way more about us than it is about them. And this is where things get really fascinating from a psychological perspective. There's actually a name for this, from Freud of all people, repetition compulsion. It's this unconscious pull to repeat horrible things from our past, often by picking friends who are just plain bad for us. Why? Well, sometimes it's because we don't think we deserve any better. Or maybe it's just easier than trying. Okay, but hold on. You're probably thinking, isn't helping people a good thing? Isn't it a virtue to try and lift someone up? And that's a totally fair question. But the real reason we want to rescue someone can be, well, pretty dark. For a perfect, if kind of disturbing example of this, we gotta turn to Dostoevsky. The narrator in Notes from Underground is this absolutely miserable guy, and he decides he's gonna save a young prostitute named Liza. He cooks up this whole dramatic story in his head where he becomes her savior and she worships him. It's this massive, self-serving fantasy where he's the hero. But then, the fantasy meets reality. Liza actually shows up at his door, looking for that salvation he promised, and he just turns on her with this unbelievable cruelty. He tells her the truth. His rescue mission was never about her. It was about him. He'd been humiliated, so he wanted to feel powerful by humiliating someone else. His help was nothing more than a weapon. And here's the kicker. This isn't just some old Russian novel. The science actually backs this up. Studies clearly show that when you put a struggling kid into a group of stable, high-functioning kids, the group doesn't pull the struggling kid up. No, the struggling kid pulls the group down. The bad habits spread, not the good ones. And why is that? Because let's be honest, it's always easier to pull someone down than to lift them up. So all of this brings us right back to the heart of the matter. If trying to rescue people is so dangerous, what's the alternative? It's choosing a completely different kind of relationship. It's about choosing friendships that are reciprocal, where you're both aiming for something better together. So here it is, the question you have to ask yourself, and you have to be brutally honest about it. Think about a friend in your life. Would you recommend that friendship to your own sister, to your father, to your son? If the answer is no, then why in the world would you have that friend for yourself? And the difference between these two types of people, it's night and day. See, people who genuinely want the best for you, your real friends, they will not tolerate your cynicism and your self-destruction. They'll celebrate when you succeed. But people who are dragging you down, they're the ones offering a cigarette to a former smoker. They're the ones who get jealous and weird when you do well, because your success is a bright, painful spotlight on their own failures. So choosing good friends, it's not about finding people who just make you feel comfortable and cozy. It's actually about taking on a challenge. The challenge of aiming for something better, for an ideal. This next idea is so powerful. Chew on this for a second. Every hero, a judge. What does that mean? It means that when you surround yourself with good people, with heroes, they act as a challenge. Just by trying to be better, you're holding up a mirror to those who have chosen to give up. And that can make them really, really uncomfortable. And that's why this rule is so unbelievably hard. It is not easier to surround yourself with good, healthy people. It's so much harder. It takes real guts, real strength to stand next to someone who inspires you because it forces you to look at your own flaws and demand more from yourself. And that, right there, brings us all the way back to where we started, with David. See, a masterpiece like this isn't just some pretty thing to look at. It's an ideal, made real. It confronts you, it looks right at you, and it's basically shouting, you could be more than you are. That is what a real friend does, a true well-wisher. They are the human version of that statue. They're the people who, simply by being who they are, challenge you to become who you could be. So, I'm going to leave you with a question. Take a hard, honest look at the people you spend your time with. Look, this isn't about being cruel or just cutting people out of your life. It's about having the courage to surround yourself with people who don't just reflect who you are now, but who you could become. So ask yourself this: who in your life is your David?